Alright YouTube, so we are back of course to talk about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and today we are hopping back into the topic of the ending of Remake, the illustrious chip bag, multiple timeline stuff. As always, of course, I'm perusing the internet for things to talk about when it comes to Remake, and I came across yet another kind of older Reddit post from like 2 months back that talks about what the chip bag could mean. I think it's very interesting. Now, there are a couple possible flaws with this, as there are with pretty much any theory out there, and we'll talk about that as the video goes on. So here we have the Reddit post from 2 months ago from November Ride, and I'm actually going to read over really quickly. So those familiar with the OG know how Sephiroth fucks with Cloud's head, and the Cloud plays the unreliable narrator. What if in Remake this takes on a visual aspect? Like maybe seeing the Terrier stamp at the end of the game is the truth, maybe Stamp has been a Terrier the whole game. However, because of Cloud's unreliability, he, and subsequently us, sees a Beagle throughout the game. This would be a really interesting form of visual storytelling. It really hit home in the raid on Midgar after Cloud is recovered. Then we'll be going through the same train tracks as in Part 1, but all the Beagle art will now be seen as the Terrier because Cloud's recovered. We finally see the truth about Cloud and Zack's past. It would be some Kojima-esque visual storytelling for sure. So essentially what they're saying here with this Reddit post is when we get the visual at the end of the game, when we get the reveal of Zack, possibly surviving, the chip bag blows across the screen, we see the different Stamp logo. What if that has always been the Stamp logo? As in, the logo we're seeing throughout the majority of the game is never actually been the logo at all. It's always been the Terrier, and the Beagle is just a representation, like a visual metaphor for us, the player. It's not actually what Cloud is seeing, but for us, the player, to kind of hint at Cloud's faulty memories. And you could also chalk it up to something like Sephiroth messing with Cloud. Like, he's showing him that different logo throughout the, FF7 Part 1 story. And then at the end, whenever we get the visual of Zack and it shows the actual logo, again, that's just a representation of showing that not everything Cloud is seeing or thinking is actually true. And to be honest, I think there's a lot of credibility to this idea, and here's why. Whenever we get the flashes and visuals with Cloud, with like the headaches and things like that, what's being shown to him is what actually happened, right? It's the truth. Whether stuff that takes place in the past, like the Nibelheim incident, Cloud's house burning in front of him from a POV perspective, or stuff that happens in the future, like Aerith's death or reunion, or even Red 13 running with his cubs or pups or whatever the hell they are. At least according to what we know to be the Final Fantasy VII story, all of these things are true. And even when it comes down to the reveal of Zack for the first time in Remake, on the highway outside of Midgard, that is also a vision being shown to us. Cloud gets the little headache, it cuts away to Zack. When we come out of it, we actually see like Aerith, like the camera's on Aerith, implying that at least Cloud and Aerith, or possibly the entire group, seen that. It's part of why I've never been entirely on board with the multiple timeline stuff, because I've always taken the ending scene as something for us, the players, not necessarily important to the Remake story, or something that's happening parallel to our story in some sort of alternate dimension or timeline. It's more so for us, the player. Because again, I think the ending scene is full of like foreshadowing for Zack's death, because based on the original game and Crisis Core, we haven't actually got to the moment where he's supposed to die yet. While I do think everything about this ending sequence is important, I do think it's also full of a lot of misdirection to imply that Zack will survive. But that's just my interpretation. I'm not trying to rehash this topic necessarily, but we're talking about the ending again, so we obviously got to cover it. I'm not going to go super in depth on trying to break down why this, that, or the other is true or not true. Like, we have videos about that on the channel. You can watch those. But also, as I mentioned previously, there are a couple problems and things that I have with this theory. For one, if this is based on Cloud being an unreliable narrator, having messed up memory and things, then is all of what we're playing in Part 1 just like a story he's telling to somebody else? Like, are we going to pick up Part 2 and he's like telling the story of Part 1 to somebody? Because that sounds kind of stupid. And I just don't want that to be the case. And the second thing would be that if this is the case, like the Terror logo is the actual logo, the Beagle thing is like some metaphor for us, the player, then it's literally just for us, the player, and the player alone. Because there's times within the game where we see the Beagle logo and Cloud's not actually there. An example would be Jesse's house whenever we go there, like, was it Chapter 5, I think? Like, Cloud never steps foot into the kitchen, but we, the player, get a cutscene where we're in the kitchen with Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge and Jesse's mom, and we see the Beagle logo on the table. Again, Cloud never got to go into that room or see that, so it's not some sort of like warped reality or perspective of Cloud's or his head being messed with. It'd be some sort of metaphor, meta, big brain moment thing for us, the player, and the player alone. And I just don't know if they're going to go that complex with this story. They could, and it'd honestly be kind of cool, but I think it'd go over a lot of people's heads. I do think it'd be kind of cool for us to do like the raid on Midgar later on in whatever game that's going to be, game number 6 or some shit, and we're going back through like the Sector 4 tunnels, the Winding Tunnel, or whatever it's called, and we see the logos again that we remember from Part 1, but they're the Terror logo, and they've always been the Terror logo. I think that would be a pretty cool reveal, but again, I don't know how much I buy into this theory, but I do think it's very interesting to discuss. Anyways, my dudes, that is the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new and want to stay updated with more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter at dashingdavidyt. and my Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.